Welcome to Film Freaks. This is Justin Llewellyn,
and Eddie Williams.
And this is now our third. This is part 3 of our discussion of the Star Wars films. And before we start this discussion, I just wanted to apologize for the last couple of discussions we had about the Star Wars films. We had guest appearances on here, which featured Superfan K, Hannibal Miller, also known as Superfan K on YouTube. And we also had my friend Will Walker and Timothy Anderson. But unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, a couple of them had dropped out on the first discussion. So we apologize that we were having some technical issues. And we were also, and tonight's just going to be me and Eddie, because we tried to get the other guys to come in, but they were busy, so they couldn't make it. But
we're gonna go ahead and finish it off.
Yeah, so we figure we kind of end things with the newer Star Wars films now, since since we already talked about the original films and the prequels. So we apologize that the other guys couldn't make it, but if you guys are listening to this, you're always welcome anytime to come on this show, and we like hearing your guys' thoughts as well. And you can also check their channels out at the Movie Doctor. Doctorful, which is where Will Walker's channel is. You can also check out Superfan K, and Poppin Movies is where Timothy Anderson's at. So, to kind of continue where we had from our previous discussions, we are now going continue with Star Wars. We now get to the Clone Wars series. So, here's a backstory on this. In 2000,
before he talks about this, the Clone Wars 2003 and 8, I did not see, so I can't give any input.
Yeah, I've seen all of the 2003 TV series, but I haven't seen all of the 2008 series. But I'll basically explain more of this, and this is basically something I'll be discussing more of, but we'll go from there with it. But anyway, after Attack of the Clones came out in 2002, Cartoon Network decided to air a mini series called The Clone Wars, based on continuing the story of the Clone Wars. That's basically Cartoon Network decided to make a spin-off of Star Wars for this mini series called Clone Wars that aired in 2003. Now, basically, what this was this animated series takes place between Episode 2 and Episode 3 of the prequel series. And basically, this follows Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi and all the Jedi, actually, who are fighting the Confederacy of Independent Systems and the Sith throughout this series, and they're having to still go after Count Dooku. And we also get introduced to some other new villains, such as General Grievous and Ventress. And I gotta be honest, when I first watched this show, I was so fascinated by it, because it was basically a show that actually went into a lot more depth with its characters and took its time, because it feels to me like the problem that I think George Lucas had with some of the live action prequels was that it didn't seem like a lot of the character development was there. And the Clone Wars TV series, both this one and also the later 2008 series, actually filled in that gap, basically. And if you ever get a chance to watch it, Eddie, it's actually, the 2003 series is actually pretty good.
Yeah, I'll give it a watch. I try to watch it before we, because I don't like doing, retroing without watching everything. I actually try to get to it, but I had a busy schedule, had a lot of personal things going on, so I'll get to it sometime.
Yeah. But we also had I do highly recommend it. It lasted for quite a lot, for 3 seasons, and it actually ended to where the third, it actually ends right when Episode 3 begins. So it basically fills in a long history of what happened between Episode 2 and 3. Because what it also did was it actually showed a lot of the darker path that Anakin Skywalker takes, because in this series, and also in the 2008 series, from what I've watched in that show, this basically goes into him trying to find himself as a Jedi, because he actually becomes a Jedi Knight in this cartoon show. And then when he starts to fight other villains, such as this character named Ventress, he actually goes down a path to where he actually you see a lot of the tension that you see a lot of the anger that's inside of him that the episode 3 would later show with that leads him down to becoming Darth Vader. So yeah, this show was definitely, it was very fascinating how they pushed a lot of the depth with its characters and took its time actually with showcasing a lot of stuff we didn't get from the movies. Like, did you know in this show we also get to see Mace Windu do a lot of stuff we didn't even see in the live action films. Like in the cartoon, we actually get to see him do like martial arts moves and stuff, which is pretty cool. Yeah. But that was basically, not to go really too big into it. I would say that overall that was a very good series, but and I really enjoyed the way that they showcased a lot of not only what the Jedi could do, but also what the clone troopers do as well. And then we got to the 2008 series, which before that TV series came out, there was also a movie that came out the same year that basically is more like a pilot, so to speak. So it's not really a film, as it is more of just episodes that are converted into one movie to make it a feature-length film. In 2008, we had the Star Wars Clone Wars film, which was released theatrically, so it is still technically a Star Wars theatrical film. But if you look at it, though, it's more of a pilot than it is a movie. Because in that movie, it deals with Anakin and Obi-Wan having to rescue Jabba the Hutt's son, and it had to deal with Anakin now has a Padawan that he's training to follow his path, or to take him under his wing, so to speak. And I gotta be honest, man, like, if I'm going by theatrical films, I think that's probably my least favorite of all the films, if you're going by the films that were released in theaters. Because I felt like the film it didn't work as a film as it does with working with the TV show, because it deals with... Because the animation also looks kind of not really too... It doesn't look that good. The characters themselves are very thinly written, and it really just feels like a fill-in for the TV series.
So what's the difference between the 2003 and 2008?
Well, that's the thing. As far as story, if you look at it, though, the 2008 version kind of is more like... It's like kind of going... It's kind of set between certain episodes of the 2003 series, because the 2008 series was trying to build more of the relationship with not only Anakin and Obi-Wan, but also it was actually given screen time to some of the stormtroopers, because you would actually get individual episodes where they wouldn't focus on Jedi, they would focus on other characters that are besides our main heroes. And it dealt...
Could it be kind of like kind of similar to a failed reboot?
Basically, yeah, because Clone Wars, the 2003 version, was a lot more action-oriented, and it dealt with a lot of things that were more... Well, it was more like... Okay, the 2003 version kind of had things more of a fast-paced action, mixing with emotion type vibe. The Clone Wars 2008 series dealt more with, like... It dealt more with your typical action elements, stuff that you see in TV shows, but at the same time, it still had similar things to it. So they're really more like apples and oranges, because they're more like the same for each other. They just kind of have different things going on with their shows, because they also introduced some other things in the 2008 version, such as we get more elements with characters that are previously returning. Like, if you remember Darth Maul from Episode 1, he actually comes back in that show.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that. I do remember seeing, like, a scene of him, or a little, like, an animated picture of him.
Yeah.
So how do they explain that, then?
Well, I've only gotten to the first, like, 10 or so episodes, so I haven't gotten that far, but from what I've gathered was that he actually survived his fall, and I think it had something to do with some kind of, like, I don't know if it was a curse or something that had to do with the Force or something that made it to where his body got back together. and so he actually did survive from Obi-Wan killing him in the first film.
Okay.
So, but I mean, there's more I can go into detail, but I've only seen mainly the Clone Wars 2003 series than I have with the 2008 series. But I will say,
what would your grades be on both of them?
The 2003 series, I give probably like a 9 out of 10. The 2008 series, because I've fully watched it, I can't really judge it from what I've watched so far. I probably give it a good 8.5 out of 10. But the movie, though, as its own film, I kind of give that more of a 3, probably a 4 out of 10, because it's definitely my least favorite Star Wars film that on a film perspective.
Yeah.
But pretty much after that success, there was also another TV series that came out. Well, I don't know if it was... Yeah, it was actually the year before we got Force Awakens. There was actually another TV series that came out for Disney Channel called... or Disney XD called Star Wars Rebels. And this was yet another...
Yeah, I hear about that, too.
Yeah, and this was another animated show that took place between episodes 4... actually, between episodes 3 and 4. So, between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, this dealt with more like smugglers and kind of like what they did with Rogue One. They focus mainly on like scoundrel type characters that are more doing like their own thing and stuff. But keep in mind, I haven't really watched the show, so I can't really judge it. I have seen a couple episodes where Darth Vader has shown up, and you also get to see Obi-Wan and all them. So you get to see guest appearances from popular characters. But it's basically telling it more of its own story in that, to where it's trying to kind of do what Rogue One did, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but we were... but yeah, so I can't really judge that one, but I'll say that if I ever get a chance to watch it, I'll probably check it out.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, and then in 2012, Disney got a hold of the rights to Lucasfilm, which is the company that made the Star Wars films. And a lot of people were skeptical when this happened because George Lucas basically paid Disney Disney paid George Lucas $4 billion for the rights of Star Wars. So basically, all the future films now are under Disney's label, and that's where now we get into the 2015 version, the 2015 film directed by J.J. Abrams called Star Wars: The Force Awakens, it's actually continuing from the original trilogy. Now, keep in mind, we actually did a review of this a couple years ago. Me and Eddie did, and also our other friend Jordan. So we won't have a lot to discuss with this movie, but we'll go into some things that we probably didn't cover in that review of it. This story basically deals 30 years actually after the original films, and it deals with a new set of characters. You have Rey, and well, before we get to even the new film. Actually, I was quite hyped for Force Awakens when it came out, because this was like the...
Oh, yeah. It was a big hype when it came out.
Yeah, because this was the first Star Wars film that not only brought back all of our original main casts from the original films, but it was also continuing where those films originally left off, And it's
a continuation after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. And it got me the most excited because not only that, it was directed by J.J. Abrams, who directed the first 2 Star Trek films.
Yep.
And so, but basically, for those of you who have been following our channel, we actually did a review of this a couple years ago, so we won't go into a lot of detail with the film. But we'll kind of cover some things that we probably didn't cover in our original review of it, because when we originally reviewed the film, we didn't have a spoiler discussion. We just did it as a non-spoiler.
We were pretty much just freeballing it too, so.
Yeah, because we reviewed it the exact same night that we watched the movie, and this was when we watched that in IMAX. Yeah. So to get into the story, this story actually takes place 30-something years after Return of the Jedi, where we have basically Luke Skywalker is now pretty much has ran away. He's basically secluded himself to somewhere that's unknown, and we actually have a new enemy that's called the New Order, which is basically the new Empire, so to speak. And the New Order is led by Kylo Ren, played by Adam Driver, and him and his empire are having to look for uh, are having to look for Luke Skywalker due to previous history that happened. And then we get introduced to some other characters that are now have become some of my fan favorites, including Finn, who actually started out as a stormtrooper working for Kylo Ren's empire under the First Order.
And escape.
Yeah,
but escape because he seen what they were doing and he knew it was wrong, so he got out of there for escape.
Yeah, and I would be too, because when they first start, in his first scene, you see all the damage that the First Order does when they start killing all the villagers there on that planet that they go to, and we also get introduced to that little droid called BB-8, who's basically like a kind of a smaller version of R2-D2, but on wheels, he's like a roller ball. That little thing is cute though, and then you have his owner is played by that's when we also get introduced to Poe Dameron, who's basically like the Han Solo equivalent because he's very cocky, and he basically at first we don't really see much of him because he tries to escape, but then he gets confronted by Kylo Ren and all that, and then the rest of the film deals after Finn decides to leave the First Order because of the shit that he's been seeing. We don't really see Poe Dameron for a while after that. Did you notice that?
No. Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, because and the reason being is because behind the scenes, they actually originally wanted to kill his character off, but because test audiences liked his character, they actually decided to keep him in.
Yep.
So they decided to keep him in for the rest of the movie. But then the rest of the film...
That's the dude that crashed and he thought he died, right?
Yeah.
I think that dude was doing a movie, too. He was tied up with some other films, too.
Yeah, he may have been.
Which hence the reason why he was missing the majority of the film.
Yeah. I think he was doing that Ex Machina movie or something.
He was doing that, but he also did that one movie that I saw. I can't remember the name of it, where he's a villain. He's the bad guy. Oh
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I think that was it. I think it might have been Ex Machina or something, but
yeah, the one I saw had to do with like drug cartels or some crap like that.
Oh okay, yeah, I don't think I've seen that one, but I think I know what you're talking about.
No! I take that back. That was actually not that movie. That didn't happen. Never mind. He was a villain in Bloodfather.
Oh okay, got you. Well, that's the thing too. Is that and the rest of the film deals basically with our new character we have, whose name it's this girl named Rey, who is pretty much kind of living the life similar to Luke Skywalker, where she's on a desert planet and she's basically a scoundrel where she has to get by and everything. And I like how when we first see her, she's kind of on that desert. When she's in the desert area, you see all the like old, just all the old like the remains of like
basically
walkers
all
and stuff.
Remains of the star.
Yeah, of the remains of the Star Destroyer and stuff, which is cool. Well, and plus also we have and as the film goes along, you get to see a lot that goes through her because she feels like there's something that's surrounding her history in this film where she's having flashbacks about her parents and that her parents abandoned her or something. And the rest of the film deals with her pretty much wanting to do the same thing all the time because she's so used to being on Jakku, that desert planet, until she meets Finn. Yeah. And then that's when basically when they pretty much are having to escape from some shit that goes down, that's when they end up taking the Millennium Falcon, which I thought was a funny scene where it's like, what is that thing over there? He's like, oh, don't take that, it looks all rusty. And it turns out to be the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're after that running to the Millennium Falcon is Finn's got that warrant out for him because they notice he's missing. And then, he kind of pretty much interacts where Rey pushed into the thing too.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but we also have, that's when we also get the feature of the return of not only Han Solo, but also Chewbacca in this. And one of my favorite lines is right when they show up and they say, "Chewie, we're home." And, man, it was such a blast seeing Harrison Ford come back in this because, man, it felt like, you know, it felt like I was a kid again when I first watched the movie. You know, seeing some of my favorite characters come back in this movie, it felt like watching the original films again, you know?
Yeah, I was so glad that they ended up bringing everybody back.
Yeah, because basically we also see that Han Solo has gone back to his old life because of some stuff that went down between Return of the Jedi and this one. He went back to being like a kind of like a scoundrel, basically. You know, doing old bounty hunters stuff and all that. Which, if looking at it today, I do remember that I do notice that it was a bit CGI-ish when they had that tentacle thing that goes after them. Yeah. Yeah, there's some.
Yeah, Han Solo is being kind of remind me of Guardians of the Galaxy where Han Solo, where he finds the Millennium Falcon, you know, flying in space, him and Chewie get back on board on it. But you've come to find out that everybody in the universe that's like bounty is looking for his ass.
Yeah, and not just that, but we also get to see
You remember that one spaceship that was after him, or those groups of people?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. It did kind of remind me a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy after thinking about it.
Yeah.
But and plus, Han is back to being his old smart ass way again, where, you know, him and Chewie are bantering back and forth, and it's just their chemistry is always so fascinating. And I like too how we pretty much also get to see Leia again in this as well, because between this one and Return of the Jedi, them two have pretty much split up, and so when they move back together, you really feel that like really nostalgic moment to where you get to hear that classic music that happens when they're together, and you know, it feels so great to see them again, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get to see too much interaction with them too.
I know.
I would love to see that.
And I will say, one of my biggest things that I wish they could have done was we don't really get a whole reunion between them two and also Luke, because the only reunions we have is just with Leia and Han.
Yeah, so, and it's very minor too. So
yeah, but for what they do, I still enjoyed.
Yeah, I did too.
But you got one of my biggest, but but I really do love Force Awakens. You know, not only did it bring back.
I think it's like I get like a lot of hate for it. But I still enjoyed for what they did. I felt like it's like more of a starter for a new trilogy. I do like Kylo Ren as Han Solo's. You know, we all know now, and it ain't a spoiler, that he's the son of Han Solo and son of Leia. And I do like his. He portrays a very dark villain in this film.
Yeah, he does. You know what? He's a very complex character. I like that they basically give it to where he idolizes Darth Vader, and he even keeps his ashed helmet. But
he wants to be like his grandfather.
Yeah, but it's still a conflicting matter, because even though he wants to be like his grandfather, you can still see the small light inside of him, to where he is thinking about his family and everything. And
unfortunately, what I would have liked more with Force Awakens is if they would have done what drove Adam Driver mad.
Yeah, that's one of the things that but see, I think that's probably what I wasn't really too thinking too much on, because when I first saw the film, I kind of feel like he's one of those characters that's meant to be more mysterious, to where, you know, kind of like Vader was, where you didn't really get much backstory for him until the later films. That's kind of how they're doing with this one. I feel like the more mysterious he is, the more we later uncover with the later films.
Yeah, not with that big old Sith thing was pretty creepy.
Yeah, Snoke, basically the Emperor equivalent in this, that's played by Andy Serkis. Because that's because in this dude, there's a lot of rumors that have it that he's supposed to be a character from the past, but I honestly, at this point, really don't know who it could be. For all I know, it could be probably the old Emperor, or it could be Jar Jar, for all I know.
So we'll see where that leads to. But yeah, man, it was a really good. And then we got the emotional, sad ending of Han Solo dying.
Yeah, because well, before we get to that, one of my biggest things I enjoy with this film is that even though it does take a lot of liberties from New Hope, because you can tell that a lot of the elements are there from it, it still does build its own story for me, especially when you have the stuff where Han Solo is trying to teach Rey how to pretty much, survive and everything. And you also, and from what I remember, I don't remember them looking for anyone like big that was like for a main character in the New Hope except Leia, but they find her in the middle of the movie. This one, they spent the entire film looking for Luke Skywalker.
Yep. And
so I really do love that mystery that they built up to it, because you don't know where the hell he's at.
Yeah.
And one of my other biggest things is Rey is also one of those kind of characters that I really enjoy, because you really want to know more about her from her history and stuff, because you're led to believe, as the film reveals, that she's a Jedi, and it actually shows that when we actually get that twist to where she discovers that she can actually see like visions and stuff of the Force and everything, and that the Force is actually calling her. And we have reason to believe that she's actually connected somehow to one of the main characters. Now, we don't know yet, but some people believe that she's either connected to Luke somehow, or she's actually connected to probably Leia.
We'll see.
Yeah, but one of the other biggest things I highly enjoy as well is the way that the film sticks with a lot of the practical effects. Again, was fascinating, because you remember how in the prequels we kind of got a little bit overuse of CGI a lot. This one, I'm glad that they went back to liberties and making it like old school, like from the original trilogy. Yeah,
and I also like that is true. The practicals was phenomenal in this film. I love how did you feel about the CGI face of that one dude? Oh, that's the next movie.
Yeah.
Never mind.
My only complaint with some of the CGI.
Great practicals. I also like that little jungle world that Leia's on. That was pretty neat. That was really pretty. I also ended up enjoying the whole snowy atmosphere for where Kylo Ren's stormtroopers are at.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. That's where basically we get. It kind of looked like Hoth, basically.
What it kind of reminded me of is like fucking like the Nazis.
Yeah, I think that was intentional too, because it's supposed to symbolize. I think they were kind of going for some symbolism there with the whole hierarchy and stuff.
Yeah.
Because they end up building a weapon that's even bigger than the Death Star, because it actually explodes more than one planets at a time. So I really like that. Even like I said, there are some things in this film I get what people hate about, the fact that it reuses a lot of the same plot from New Hope. But honestly, I don't really see that comparison, because they just kind of take like some of those elements and they just build upon it. I feel like it's all about world building and having to really like kind of get things going again, because you got to think too, like, the film also deals with other storylines that are happening besides those things.
Yes. I highly agree, man. I think people overjudge it a little bit. They just overlook the basics, and they don't look at other parts of it. I think it was, highly, I think it was hated too much. And it was in my top 10 of 2015. I fucking loved it, in my opinion. I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. Yeah,
I did too. It's definitely one of my favorite Star Wars films, since it's not as good as New Hope, but I do say it's at least below it. It's like you have like the original trilogy, and then Force Awakens is like right there below it.
And it gave us an emotional death, which we don't ever get.
Yeah, it's where we lose Han Solo, because that moment when he has to confront his son, who's Kylo Ren and everything, it's just it really. When I saw it in the theater, my jaw just dropped. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, it was good.
Yeah, and not just that, but we also have one of the biggest moments is when we reveal that Rey is actually a Jedi when she fights Kylo Ren, and that lightsaber fight was pretty badass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get the closure point where pretty much Leia is wanting to look for Luke at the end, and they find him, and pretty much we end it with Rey handing him a lightsaber, and that leads into the next one.
Yep, and we see that actually ends on a cliffhanger like Empire Strikes Back, which is unusual because if you notice, like a lot of the other trilogies, like New Hope and Phantom Menace, they always ended on kind of like on a triumphant note where there's really no lead to a sequel. This one, they're like, no, this actually does lead to another film.
Yeah.
So I really do enjoy that. I like that you're actually getting pumped for the next movie for it.
Yep.
Now, if I do have like any major cons for this film, it's really just some of the familiar elements, I guess, from New Hope, but it didn't bother me to the point like a lot of people have had problems with. And I did have some trouble, like I said, with the CGI and stuff, but that's really just kind of like some minor points. Other than that, I still highly love the movie.
Yeah, I did too.
And keep in mind, by the time we're recording this right now, Last Jedi has already come out, and so we're actually seeing that in the next couple of days after this recording has taken place. So be looking forward to our review of that coming soon. But anyway, with that being said, I still give it like a 9.5 out of 10, like my original grade from 2015.
Same here.
Yeah. So after Force Awakens came out, which became actually, I think, probably like became the biggest Star Wars film of all time, basically. It made so much at the box office, made billions, and it pretty much at this point, it showed that Star Wars was back. You know, it actually showed that there was going to be not only future sequels, but that we were also getting spin-offs that were coming out as well. And now we're getting to the point where pretty much every year we're going to have a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
So, in 2015, after the success of Force Awakens, we also heard reports that they were doing another Star Wars film coming out the following year, which was Rogue One. And basically, following the success of Force Awakens, Disney decided to focus on other spin-offs for characters coming out, including not only just Rogue One, but also future films, including the new Han Solo film coming out next year. And then in the next couple of years, they're supposed to have an Obi-Wan film. So, you know, I am all for the idea for these type of movies, but the only one I'm really not really thinking that they should probably do, honestly, is the Han Solo film. And we won't go into too much detail with that because we already discussed it in our previous discussion we had. But that's just one where I feel like they could probably do something a little different with. You know?
Yeah.
But with Rogue One...
one of them I really think they need to do is a Yoda.
Yeah, I would love to see a Yoda or a Yoda and Mace Windu movie. That would actually be pretty cool. Or you could even do some other like side ones, like a Boba Fett movie. That's one that a lot of fans would really enjoy. That's one I would probably enjoy too. But anyway, the next one we got to was Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, which came out last year. And we're not going to go into major detail with this film because we already had a spoiler and a non-spoiler review with this movie. So we're kind of keep it very brief. So we'll just talk overall about the film and just kind of go into our pros and cons, just again like we had in the other one. So with this one, it was decided that they wanted to pretty much do another prequel again because this one deals with a group of basically like mercenaries, so to speak, who are having to recover the plans for the Death Star that's being basically built early in this film, right before the events of New Hope. And I remember when this film came out that I enjoyed it, but it definitely I felt like it was a little bit a step back from Force Awakens in my opinion.
It is, but I still really enjoyed this because I thought it tied in very well.
Yeah, it did, because this story deals with these mercenaries. Well, one of them's, well, they have different names. You have Jin, who is basically the daughter of the creator, the guy who actually invented the plans for the Death Star, and who was an imperial officer on the Death Star. And basically, the film deals mainly with her story arc, because she's having to try to confront her father about everything of what happened, and while at the same time she comes across the other characters, including the kind of assassin guy played by Diego Luna, and then you have some of my favorite characters, which includes the droid, who pretty much isn't built for combat, but every time he's on screen, he just has so many funny lines.
Yeah.
And then you have Donnie Yen's character, who's kind of the blind man, who basically has who believes in the Force, basically. And you got his buddy with him. And then you have the pilot, who was taken by, because in this film, the main girl, Jin, she grew up actually under Forrest Whitaker's character, who I guess basically trained her or something. It's never really explained, because behind the scenes, there was some extensive reshoots that happened, and it feels like there was a lot of deleted scenes that we never got. Because if you noticed, like, we went from her being a little child all the way to where she's a grown woman.
Yeah, that was one of my cons, yeah.
Yeah. And so, Forrest Whitaker's character is a guy who pretty much trained her to become, I guess, probably a mercenary or something. It's never really explained, but you get the idea that he trained her all her life, and she basically quit on him, and some shit went down. And then he later comes across this guy who was a pilot for something, and he is like asking him like information using that weird like tentacle thing that I thought was pretty cool on the practical effects.
Yeah.
And basically the story deals with them having to work together in order to get the Death Star plans from the Empire, and then get it to the rebels, basically. And the rest of the film also deals with the director of the guy who's basically behind the operation, Kinnick, who's played by the guy from Dark Knight Rises, Ben Mendelsohn, that's this guy's name. And you you get reintroduced to General Tarkin, who was from the original New Hope, and they actually used CGI to make his face like very look real, basically, because the guy has been dead for a long time, but they managed to actually really render a lot of the CGI for him to bring him to life. I thought really worked. Though after looking at it now, I think I'm probably better off watching that in 3D, because I remember when I first watched it in 3D, the CGI I thought really worked on him pretty good. But now watching it in 2D, I can see a lot of the complaints people had, because if you watch it in 2D, it does look a little jittery at times. Have you noticed that?
And I remember that movie. One of my problems with the movie was the fact that they promoted Forrest Whitaker throughout the trailers, and he literally was in it for 2 minutes.
Really? Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. And it's just crazy, because it feels like we had a gap that was never filled in there. And if they never did any
something, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they never did any of those reshoots behind the scenes, we probably could have had more of his character to actually build into that. We also could have seen more of the development happen for the main girl in the film.
Yeah.
And not just that, but also one of the things I appreciate the most with this movie is how different in style it is compared to the other Star Wars films, where this one feels more like a war movie, basically. I think
that this movie's also the starting of the rebels too.
It is.
They rebel.
It is, because we also get introduced to. We didn't mention this in our spoiler discussion on our video we did. We also had one of the main leader of the rebellion, who you would later see in Return of the Jedi. She's introduced here for the first time in chronologically. She's the one who sets up the rebel base and everything. And we also get to see some other really cool Easter eggs too. Like remember the part when they go through that town and they see those two guys that would later show up in the bar?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a nice little add-on to a little tie-in to New Hope. I thought was pretty fun. And there's more we pretty much exhausted all we could with this movie with our spoiler discussion. So we're not going to go.
I would like to mention the ending part where like it shows like the girl and everybody, pretty much all the main characters die in this film.
Yeah, because
fighting, rebelling against the Darth Vader's people, and then like that's where we get Darth Vader come in, and man, he slaughters everybody. Holy shit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that's the thing too, was that Darth Vader was promoted like kind of crazy over in the trailers and stuff, but I knew going into it he wasn't going to have a big role. And but man, when they use him, they really fucking use him in this movie, especially when he's cutting all them dudes up in that last scene.
Yeah, dude, I ended up loving that scene. Golly, I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Well, not just that, but much like with Force Awakens, it was, it's great to see that these type of Star Wars films are going back to basics, where they're still going with practical effects again. They give it that very authentic look of it that looks pretty, like that kind of gritty look to it and everything. It was actually really, it was very fascinating how they stuck with that. Now, here's something now looking back on it, I can kind of see also what some people probably had some problems with, was that, as much as I did like the CGI used for Tarkin, I did now kind of have a problem with Leia. Because when they use her at the end, after kind of looking at it for quite a little bit, you kind of notice it looks very obvious CGI.
Yeah,
now,
I guess you could say. At first it didn't, but I guess after a second look, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, the first time I watched it, I didn't really hardly notice much of it, but now seeing it, I'm like, yeah, once you kind of really look at it, it really doesn't, it looks kind of, it doesn't look quite right. As good as, the other guy they brought, basically.
I'm glad they did it. I'm still glad they did it, though, because it now ties into New Hope.
No, that's what I'm saying. I love how they use it in context. I was just saying that it just wasn't quite there looking at it again, basically.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it's not a bad effect. It's just that it seems like it wasn't rendered as good as what they probably did, what they were thinking with it.
Yeah.
Now another thing that's I'm trying to think, because we covered a lot with the spoiler discussion.
Yeah. If you got, I'm sure you'll put the links down to those.
Yeah, I'll put the links down to our spoiler discussion of Rogue One, for those of you who want to check it out, because we went over a lot of stuff in that review. If you want to check it out, so we'll kind of save some time for that. If you want to check, we'll put it in the links below. But to basically go overall,
and Rogue One, he'll put the descriptions down there so you guys can read it. Because we kind of feel like we're a little messy with the two films because we don't know what we want to discuss when we've already discussed it. So if you want a good, thorough review, watch those reviews.
Yeah. But overall, though, I like Rogue One, but I can definitely see it's not as good as Force Awakens. But it's still not a bad film either. I still highly enjoy it.
I enjoyed Rogue One. It's another, like Force Awakens, it's one of those that after it came out, everybody decided that, okay, we got to be edgy. We're going to hate it too.
Well, ironically, I've actually seen more people actually praise more of Rogue One compared to Force Awakens. Yeah. But overall, I enjoyed Rogue One. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Yeah, when it first came out, I think I gave it like an 8 or 8.5 out of 10. I had to go back, depending on what I said in my review. So it's definitely enjoyable, and I'm glad I at least got to see a spin-off a good spin-off that ties to the original films. But pretty much after this film came out, once again it was considered a big hit and everything, and it still kept a lot of things on the map for Disney and everything. So now we have the next film that's coming out is Last Jedi, which we will be doing a review for that one. That'll be a spoiler and non-spoiler. But in between, since we got some time to spare, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the video games that have also come out with Star Wars as well, since we haven't gotten to that topic.
My favorite, the classic one.
Yeah.
Battlefront 2.
Yeah, so in the past, there's been a lot of video games that I've enjoyed from Star Wars. Some of my favorite ones include, growing up, there was this one called Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, where basically in that game, it actually uses live action footage, like you're watching a film and everything. And you can also get like different types of lightsabers in that too, which is cool. But one of my other favorite ones, like the one me and him played, was actually the Battlefront games that came out on the PS2. Yeah. Because me and him actually played it here and there. Well, we played it like the whole campaign for both games, both the first game and the second game. And man, that game is like everything you can imagine what it's like being on the battlefield in those movies, you know?
Yeah. I can't get enough of the old school games. They still hold up to this day, in my opinion.
What games did you play as Star Wars back in the day?
I'm talking about the ones you and I played.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because in those games, you got to not only play you got to mainly play in the first game. You only got to play as a trooper for that game only. Because instead of playing as Jedi, they make it to where you're actually living the battles like from the movies. Though at the time when the game came out, they didn't have levels planned for Episode 3 because the movie wasn't out yet. So the second game, when it came out, they included battles from Part 2. Or I'm sorry, from Part 2 they included battles from Part 3 of Revenge of the Sith. And in this one, you also got to play as Jedi as well. And what's funny was that all these battles that you take place, they're kind of like basically capture a flag because you're having to take control of their command bases and stuff while avoiding all the enemies at once.
Yeah.
But I remember there was some levels that me and him got our ass kicked with. Especially there was this one level we went to where we were on that Camino planet where the clones were made. And every time we would go to fight the Wookiees, they would always show up and shoot our asses. They would just pop up everywhere.
I swear, them damn Wookiees, man. The ones the one we played, I swear to God, they were like the fucking Golden Gun in fucking 007.
Yeah.
One hitter quick or get my ass.
Yeah. Because they always had those crossbows shooting at you.
I know, man. They get me from all over the place. They'd be fucking miles away and still hit my ass.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But there was also, so with those games too, and also, one of my favorite parts in that game, there's a level where me and him played where you're kind of reliving the opening of Episode 4, New Hope, where the Empire is invading the Rebels, and you have Darth Vader and the Stormtroopers coming out, and you're hitting them. There's actually guys who are around, some of the enemies you're fighting, the rebel soldiers. One of them actually says, "Watch those lightsabers."
Mm-hmm,
yeah. Yeah. There's that game is just so much fun, and I can't get enough of Star Wars games, to be honest, because
I even like Lego games. They're pretty fun.
Oh yeah, I actually have the complete Saga game, which is pretty fun too. Especially on 2-player, if you get a chance to play it. Covers all 6 movies. But there was one that me and him played recently that I have been playing but not much of. It's the newer Battlefront games, and in the first Battlefront game, I like it, but I feel like there's a lot of things that are kind of like left out that they should have pretty much added on there. Now the second one, from what I'm playing, it actually is a lot better so far because they added more content. And I'm actually enjoying the campaign right now, so. I'll definitely try to finish that up before I go see the film. But, I mean, basically overall, though, Star Wars to me is just one of those franchises that I'm just so much of a geek for. Because it makes me feel like I'm a kid, I just love science fiction, stuff like this. And it just, all the films I enjoy. Yeah, some of them have their problems here and there, especially some of the prequels and everything. But I still overall enjoy this franchise.
And I also think that Star Wars is one of those rare franchises that can actually keep going on and on and on. You never have to reboot the Star Wars. You can keep building these spin-offs and keep adding on more stories to, and then maybe 10 years down the road, doing episode 10, episode 11, and episode 12. You can always forever keep adding on to this. These are one of the only franchises that can probably do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Star Trek, which is really good, and then you got some other ones, you can kind of see, like, if you do it too much, it can get overwhelming. With Star Wars, I don't see that. I think that's one of the only franchises that can, instead of ever rebooting, never do it. Just keep on adding, and they can do it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because, exactly. Because not only can you make sequels, but you can also make so many stories in this universe that it never ends. It can go on for so long.
Exactly.
So I'm always up for whatever they decide to do for Star Wars. Now, like I say, I'm not really looking forward too much with the Han Solo film. I'm hoping it'll be good, but again, that all depends when it comes out. So, but for those of you who have also seen all the Star Wars films, for those of you who have been listening, we do thank you so much for joining in for our discussion of all the Star Wars films and all the media surrounding it as well. Let us know in the comments of what you guys thought about the movies as well, and some of the other games they brought out and everything. And if you guys have any other recommendations for like any comic books or any other types of games out there for Star Wars as well, definitely let us know in the comments as well on what you guys recommend. And until then, we'll definitely be doing our review of. We'll be seeing Last Jedi here soon, in the next couple of days. So be expecting a review of that coming up soon. And until then, we do thank you so much for joining us for our discussion, and feel free to like and subscribe to our channel and check out some of our other reviews here on Film Freaks, and also on our also on SoundCloud and on YouTube. And we'll be seeing you in our next review. We'll see you later.
Later.